you said you microdose, right? And when you said that, I'm assuming mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How does that help you when you said you do it when you're going through something? Explain to someone who's never done mushrooms, because microdosing is like not a new thing, but it's become more popular.
Yeah.
Is it legal? It's not legal here in California, right?
It's not legal.
In certain states it is.
And what does that mean, microdosing? Does it mean that you're taking a little bit at a time?
Yeah. So the amount that I take is like 0.3 grams. So it's you don't
really
even
small.
You don't even feel it. Like there's nothing to feel. But at 4:30, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, when the rest of the world's quiet, and you go take a walk or a run, out on the trail, there's a deeper connection and it's a deeper grounding that allows you to just focus on whatever it is that you're pretending not to know about your current life or current situation.
Welcome to the Geena the Latina Show. I am Geena. Make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram at the Geena the Latina Show. Okay, so on this episode, we are going to talk about ayahuasca. I've never tried ayahuasca, but I've always wanted to learn more about it. Now, I am by no means saying that you should do it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. This is a complete episode about just wanting to learn more about it. So I thought I'd bring in my friend Cesar Vallin, who is very pro ayahuasca and has done it a few times, just to get to know a little bit more about what this is. Wait, sorry, I was just waiting for Teddy to find a spot. He always does this right before. Okay. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right. All right. So for today's episode, it's something that I've been wanting to talk about forever. And I have purposely not really discussed it with people because I want to get the most genuine, authentic questions to people who have actually done this. Because I've heard a lot about this, but I've never actually done it myself. And with that said, I do want to say that when we talk about things like ayahuasca, which is what we're going to talk about. You may have heard about it, you may have not. I'm not endorsing it. I'm not for it. I'm not for against it. I want to learn about it. I want to explore it because I think it's something that a lot of people have heard about. Some people have never heard about it.
I've never heard about it. I don't know anything about this. You kind of told me just the name of it.
Yeah.
And I still don't know anything. I haven't done any research. I don't know anything.
And in some circles of people, everyone knows about it. In some circles, you don't have a clue about it. Okay, so I'm going to read the definition of ayahuasca, and I'm actually going to spell it out because you're probably like, what is this? It's AYAHUASCA, and it's under medicinal, okay? So ayahuasca is a South American psychoactive brew used both socially and as a ceremonial spiritual medicine among the indigenous people of the Amazon basin, okay? Okay, so you're probably more confused, right? A lot of celebrities have talked about it. I know Michelle Rodriguez got a lot of bad press for it when a video of her on ayahuasca came out because you supposedly go through all these, this is what I've heard about, you go through all these crazy trips, it's like this whole you heal, you throw up, it's just crazy. Before we get into all that, I'm going to bring in my good friend Cesar Vallin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So he owns a restaurant here in San Diego, Cloak and Pedal. He also has a podcast. What's the name of the podcast?
Iron Minds Podcast.
Yeah, and then he's very open with everything he's gone through. And you have been a big proponent of ayahuasca. I've heard you talk about it, but we haven't had a full conversation purposely because I wanted to save it for the podcast.
Yeah.
And so hold up real quick. Subscribe, comment below, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Geena the Latina Show. Okay, let's get back to the show. Before we get into it, I wanted to go a little bit into your background so because when I first heard about it, I'm like, oh, this is like a drug, no one should do it, blah, 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 and which I'm not totally convinced that you shouldn't. However, I do hear a lot of people that have great experiences with it too. I also hear people that have horrible experiences with it. So, Cesar, you, what would you call yourself? A recovering... Or what do you call yourself? I don't want to label you. Not recovering.
Years of just sedating myself, and zoning out and tuning out of my life, and over the last, I feel like my journey of self-discovery has started when I was 14 years old, and my dad used to make me write stuff on paper over and over and over again. But over the last 5 years, I've really dug deep inwards, introspectively.
And when you say sedating yourself, what do you mean exactly?
I mean, injecting myself with no needles, but anything from here and under the sun with anything that like would sedate me, whether it was drinking for 16 years straight, nearly every day, even if it wasn't a lot. I didn't want to come to terms that I had a problem drinking, doing recreational drugs regularly, and just, abusing. I was, addicted to pain pills for such a long time. I almost had to go to rehab for that. And so, for me, I had this story that I wasn't addicted to anything because I didn't do a lot of everything. But if you combined it all, it was a really big problem.
Yeah. And then... So then all of a sudden you decided to get sober, right? And how long have you been, or I'm not saying sober, where are you at now, I guess?
So I've decided to, in 5 years, it'll be 5 years I stopped drinking.
Okay.
This December.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It all started with a conversation that you and I had at a sushi restaurant. And if
you
anybody
can tell.
if anybody knows Geena, she's always gonna come straight to you. It's never gonna be like, and she always looks at you straight in the eyes and she's like, that's not sober. Or that's not that. And so we had a conversation about when's the last time I had been sober. And I said, every January I don't drink. She's like, yeah, but everything. And I remember thinking like, and I kind of stayed quiet and I had to go home and think. She's like, when's the last time you were sober? And I literally couldn't even answer, I think, until like maybe a week later. And I had realized that for the last 16 years, at that point, I had been just sedating myself with pain pills, either smoking, cocaine, MDMA, or Molly, or ecstasy, anything that you could think of. And there was never a point that I could remember that I wasn't absorbing something or taking something that wasn't sedating me for more than maybe a day, maybe because I was too hungover or I was just too still high from the day before, And so that's really no different than anybody else that has a severe, heroin addiction or meth addiction or anything, all these other drugs that we that are so frowned upon and that are bad. So, when that conversation happened, I realized that I think that was probably in that summer of 2016. And then December 31st of 2016 was the last time at like 10 p.m. was the last time I had it. I didn't even make it to midnight. And I decided to stop drinking for a year. I almost drank again on the New Year's a year after that. And then there was a couple times where I almost, drank. And, I wasn't completely sober. It took me a while to stop doing recreational drugs. And then now over the last year, I have pretty much focused more on entheogens, which is psychoactive, plant medicines, with its psilocybins, which are mushrooms, ayahuasca, peyote. And so those I have been doing under supervision or microdosing. I microdose like 3 times a week.
Yeah. And so that's what I want to talk before we get into that, and that's why I wanted to do the back. Because someone may say, well, you were addicted to all this stuff. What's the point of this? Or isn't that the same? But before we get that, I wanted to tell a little story. I wanted to tell you, Cesar, I don't think I've told you, when he said that he was going to stop drinking in 2016, I had said I was going to give up hot Cheetos because I used to eat hot Cheetos like every single day. And at the time, I didn't give them up because honestly, I didn't believe that he was going to actually... I said, if you give that up, I'll give hot Cheetos. And I didn't, and we never talked about it after that. And then he was like sober for a while. And he's like, did you give up hot Cheetos? I'm like, I didn't think you'd actually do that. But I will say, Cesar, now I have not had hot Cheetos since like March at least, not 0.
Wow.
So 5 years later, I have lived up to my part of the bargain. And I think about you. Anyways, that was a little side note. Okay, so, and that's what I want to talk about. So someone that maybe you may call it addiction or whatever you want to call it to all these other things you had, to someone that doesn't understand these other things you're doing, they may think like, well, is that really getting rid of the problem? Are you really, whatever? So I wanted to go into these other things. So what are you mentioned ayahuasca, mushrooms.
So I mean, and those are great questions, right? I mean, those are deep questions that, we get to ask each other, and so, entheogens are really, it translates through God within, and so we all have it, right? We all have our inner God.
Yeah.
And so when people say that, I always believe, and I'm pretty sure you believe the same thing, that we are the representation of God in our lives.
Yes.
And so we all have the ability, and again, these are my beliefs, and that we all have the ability to connect through God internally if we choose to. And when I was able to start, trying some of these things, at first it was like, oh, this is really good. And there was a point of me where I wanted to really do more because I had that addictive personality.
Yes.
As time went on, I found myself doing less MDMA, stop doing cocaine, not doing mushrooms or psilocybins to have a good time, but rather it's more of a spiritual thing for me, where I now don't need these things. I choose to partake in them when I feel like I'm going through something, or where I'm having a big decision, or when I'm just trying to unlock, genes in my head, or create new proteins and really focus on myself.
And that's what someone may not understand. It's because, okay, wait, you're mentioning that you're so close to God, or you are a version of God, and, spirituality and all that. And then to the layman's person who doesn't understand what these are, they're like, wait, but that's a drug. Like, God doesn't do drugs.
I'm still a little confused at this.
Can you explain that a little bit more? I guess let's talk about one. Which one do you want to talk about first? That would you said you'd microdose, right? And when you said that, I'm assuming mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How does that help you? When you said you do it when you're going through something, explain to someone who's never done mushrooms.
Yeah.
Because microdosing is like not a new thing, but it's become more popular.
Yeah.
Is it legal? It's not legal here in California, right?
It's not legal.
In certain states it is.
And what does that mean, microdosing? Does it mean that you're taking a little bit at a time?
Yeah. So the amount that I take is like 0.3 grams. So it's you don't
Really
even
small.
You don't even feel it. Like there's nothing to feel. But at 4:30, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, when the rest of the world's quiet, and you go take a walk or a run, out on the trail, there's a deeper connection, and it's a deeper grounding that allows you to just focus on whatever it is that you're pretending not to know about your current life or current situation.
So you can feel it more is what you're saying. Like you can hear the birds more. You can
You're more
feel the
present.
air. You're more present.
more
so to
open.
me, and a lot of friends have told me this, and they're big like on microdosing. And I feel like, okay, so I personally meditate and I can get to that. A lot of people can't get to that same feeling when they meditate. Like I can literally meditate when it's super loud around me and really feel it exactly how you're feeling, right? Yeah. Is it the same kind of feeling, or like, do you know what that feels like? Or is it just a quicker way to get to that? Because a lot of people can't do that.
So, what I've come to know is that, journaling, meditation, microdosing, they're all tools for you to learn to drop in. And dropping in, for listeners that are listening, is learning to drop in and connect with your spirit guides.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a point in the future that you think that you won't be doing microdosing, that you're completely off of everything?
Yeah, I mean, possibly. Possibly. For me, it's more of like a spiritual ritual.
Because I mean, some people might see it as like you're dependent on these.
Yeah, and that's a great opportunity for them to judge if they like. Only I know the results that I've had in my life, and I think you've probably known me long enough. Geena's known me for a really long time, and so at the end of the day, we all have a choice to make. And we all get to choose what we put into our body, what we want to believe. And, just like right now in the world, a lot of what's going on is either misinformation or a lack of education, right? And so what I choose to believe may be different than what you choose to believe. My mom is convinced that this is like devil work.
Yeah.
But you ask her why, and she has no idea.
Yeah, that's how my mom would be too.
And I love my mom, but she doesn't do the due diligence to go and figure out.
Yeah.
And she literally doesn't even know what any of it is. She just heard some novela lady tell her that it was the devil.
Yeah.
And she believes in it.
Yeah.
So again, everybody has their right and their choice to show up for themselves in this world and go out there and research it. But to sit here and have people say and make judgment calls without even knowing anything, without doing any research. Yeah. I mean, isn't that what's probably wrong with the world today?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I this is where I would like, this is what kind of upsets me about some people. So I believe that you're doing it in microdosing and I understand most people that have not done the work on themselves can't understand what you're talking about when you say you do a little bit and you get to that. But could you say, I've also seen people use it just to go out and party and have fun. And that's where it gets like the bad rep, because I feel like a lot of it, including marijuana, including all that, they all come from traditional medicine from back in the day. Our shamans and all that used to use that. But because the world has made it use it
Taboo,
some
really.
crazy and become addicted, because I do think you can do too much of anything, right? We could do too much
Yeah.
we could drink too much water and die. You know what I mean? How, like, so someone like a naysayer, like, do you agree with that? Someone that's done it in the proper way, I would say, or whatever, not proper way, or like fun way, you know, what is the difference?
I mean, so I've macro dosed as well, and I macro dose like once a year, which is also like a deep, you know.
What's macrodose? Like, how much
macro
is
dosing
that?
is going to be like over like 2 grams.
And
You know,
like,
and
what does that do? Just get
it's
you
very
really?
similar to ayahuasca. You go in and you face everything you don't want to face. You know, all the things that you're ashamed of yourself, all the things that you're not willing to face in your life, of your past that you haven't, you've chosen to not either address. It shows up because, again, it's an introspective psychoactive tea. So these force you to look inward, where alcohol and all these other drugs force you to look outward.
Right.
So you disconnect. This forces you to connect.
And when you say that, it's like, so when you take all this, like say macrodosing, we're going to get to ayahuasca in a second, I promise. But when you get macrodosing and you say your face, does that mean like all this stuff comes up like when you're in the state of like this highness?
Yeah.
And then where are you and what do you
when
do?
you're in an altered
Yeah.
state, you know, a lot of the times if I do it, I'm usually out in nature, like I'm in my tent, and you know, Joshua Tree, I have I'm one of those guys that has a tent on top of my truck, you know, and so you know, or I'll camp on the ground. But for me, it's really just about connecting and putting out an intention of what it is I would like to face, or what it is I'm trying to
Before you take it.
yeah, before I take it,
Okay.
and what I'm trying to connect with. Have I taken it for fun? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, a lot of the horror stories that you hear about, you know, mushrooms or ayahuasca is really just people not knowing what they're getting themselves into, taking too much. And it's no different than drinking too much tequila. And
Yeah.
somebody's like, I hate tequila. I don't want to drink tequila anymore.
Yeah. And that brings me to the ayahuasca, because, okay, this is whatever. I've had tons of friends who have done it. I've never done it. But a lot of them sign up for like these, like they're led by like shamans, right? And so they're in a controlled environment. They're out in the wilderness. They have certain people that are like dedicated to just them, because once you take it, you're like throwing up and you have all these experiences and you're all this, to me, which sounds fucking crazy. Like, why would you want to do that? Right. Also though, I am someone who's worked on myself a lot, where I feel like all those demons have come up. I'm not saying no demons would come up, but I'm just saying like, I get what they're doing, but explain it. Okay. So let's go back to ayahuasca for someone like Chris,
Yeah,
who
I
has
have
no clue.
idea.
You know, I was going to tell him that it was like the new WWE character.
Oh, there you go.
Like wrestler, and then you ruined it.
champion coming
Yeah,
out?
I was like,
Okay.
hey, there's this new guy. He's going to take over the Undertaker's.
So this said, like the definition I read earlier, it was like a brew.
It's a psychoactive tea.
A psychoactive tea.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important that if you were to choose to do this, you don't just go freaking take it, right? You're like,
No.
you're with someone, like, should you be with a shaman? Should you be with, like, how did you do
Well,
it?
I mean, so one, it's definitely something that needs to call you. It's not something that like, oh, this sounds cool, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
Or, hey, Chris, let's go do this. Trust
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's how people have terrible experiences. It took me 10 years. It took me 10 years from the moment I heard it, and I was like, oh, that's scary. And
Yeah.
then
Well, how did you hear about it though?
friends, people doing it, people that were just, you know, and it's so funny because looking back at it now to see their journey, I'm like, wow, how do I have a life of abundance like that? And I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it, but a lot of the people that I saw doing it back in the day had this light about them, about this aura about them. The way that they looked at life was just differently. And at the time, I didn't know if they were connected. But now looking back at it, knowing what I know now, it starts to make sense. But I heard it through friends, years and years of people just saying, "Oh, I did ayahuasca." I'm like, "How was it?" And every time it was like, "Oh, it was like purging and purging."
Throwing up,
You could,
yeah.
So yeah, purging could come in forms of crying, yelling, you know, taking a dump,
Yeah, pooping.
Wow,
yeah.
really?
Like shitting all over
throwing up,
yourself.
laughing.
Yes.
So walk me through the first step of you actually going through it. So
Like-
what do you do? Like,
one-
where are you?
Well, one, go back to the supervision. It's definitely this is a spiritual ritual. This isn't something. This is not mushrooms. This is.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have your own little experience with mushrooms and do your own little ritual, but this is like a true experience that should be only done under supervision. And my first experience, it was like about possibly 3, maybe 4 years ago. I was driving down from LA, and my good friend told me that he was going to do it at his house. And I had literally just passed his house. And he's like, stop by the house. I'm like, no. I said, but I'm in. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into. He had these people. He's a pretty well-off guy. So he has these private settings in his house. And he's like, we're going to do it in our living room. And I still don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Fast forward to this, getting closer, 2 or 3 weeks before, they send out this memo of what you should be eating.
Wow.
So you start no caffeine, nothing fermented, no animal proteins. And you really start focusing on your health. And this is what this does is it allows you to cleanse yourself. And it also allows you to learn to pay attention to your relationship with food.
Yeah.
And
isn't it also, this is gonna sound crazy, but I know like when you have like say, so they're pretty much wanting you to become vegan probably for a little while before, mostly, right?
Yeah.
Because when you have all these other animal foods, you have their like spirit in you and you have their hormones and you have like, they want to get you as clear as possible so that when you go in there, it's just you.
Correct.
It's just you.
Got
so
it.
that's the theory behind that, correct? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I go in and we get there and they ask you to wear like, all white.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, fuck, are we going to get like, it's like,
Like, is this a cult?
yeah, am I gonna,
Yeah.
Is Kanye West gonna walk out?
yeah, I'm like, it's like, am I going to get home this weekend? But,
So you have to wear all white? Like a cloak? or-
lighter clothes,
Okay,
they
okay.
suggest it. I mean, they're all, yogis.
What's the reason for that? Did they say?
You know what? That's a good question. I don't really
Maybe
remember.
I would think like pure to be pure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, what I'm learning about myself is that I'm a big controller, as most people are, and we want to have control of our situation. We want to know why. I'm very, I'm very analytical, and it was a great opportunity for me to even start digging into my resistance to people telling me what to do. So they keep telling you, make sure to have your intentions. We start on a Friday, we do Friday, and then we do Saturday, and then, we're home Sunday.
So you're staying at this person's house for 2 days.
So it's a mansion?
It's not a mansion, no. It's just a nice
house in San Diego somewhere?
In Venice.
In Venice, okay.
Yeah.
So you show up on Friday.
Show up on Friday.
Like, walk us through the whole thing.
So we show up kind
you
of like
wearing
this.
all white?
I'm wearing like
Like light clothes.
I'm wearing like sweats, like
Okay.
Okay.
like gray sweats.
Gray
and,
sweats, okay.
I don't have anything on
Are you
white.
by yourself? Did you go by yourself? Or did you go
I
with a
went by
friend?
myself,
Okay. Man, I'd be taking like 10 people. Hey, you guys, let's all go do this together. We're all going to die together.
Do they tell you that you could bring anybody, or is it they just said
No,
just
this
you?
is very private.
Okay.
Yeah, like it's very exclusive.
So how many people are there when you show up?
About 10.
10? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm there with some good friends. Like
Okay.
they live up there. So we get there and there's like drums in the living room. There's like feathers and all kinds of flowers. I'm like, oh my fucking God, what did I get myself into? And, we get there and everybody's hugging each other, talking. Everybody's excited, and a lot of people haven't done it. And then, as the night goes on, the gentleman that leads us, he refuses to call himself a shaman, but he's our guide.
Yeah.
And he, sits down, everybody in a circle, and everybody starts talking about, all right, everybody, this is what we're doing. He gives you a whole background of ayahuasca and, the meaning of it, the ritual of it, the importance of nobody's ever died from it under supervision, like the proper supervision, and, what are your intentions? And so you go around, you talk about what your intentions are. And typically what people say, and I was one of those people, is, to find my purpose. And they kind of giggle at you because they're like, that's a very vague, that's what everybody, is wanting to say. But what ayahuasca does is it doesn't, it's not there to show you your purpose. It's there to show you what's in your way of your purpose. So, we go around and we start saying whatever we're saying, and I come up with my generic saying, and he goes, well, enjoy the night, and so, we start the ritual. You start drinking this tea. It's like this thick molasses, sandy, like bitter. Like
It's gross.
It is for me, it's the most disgusting thing.
Ugh.
And you drink it and you meditate. Everybody drinks and everybody's in a circle and everybody's meditating. And you're just sitting there, and I'm like, one eye open, looking around, and in my head, I'm thinking, fuck, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
Fuck,
But you already drank the tea.
Yeah. I was like, my friend Posh is over there, and I'm like, fuck him, God damn it. And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, you hear this splatter. Blah. And it's him.
Throw it up.
Because everybody goes like it starts in a circle, and then it takes about 30 to 45 minutes. And all of a sudden, it's like dominoes. Like the next person, blah, 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 and everybody's just, and I'm like sitting there, and it's getting closer to me. I'm like
throwing up?
yeah,
Okay.
they're purging.
What?
They give you buckets. So you're like purging in a bucket. And as it's getting closer, I'm like, oh my God, this is like, there's no train. I remember looking down the door and I could see the door and I was like, I want to get the fuck out of here, but you can't.
Yo, you already took that shit. I'm saying that at that point.
So we, we start and it starts to kick in, but you don't really know what's happening. And all of a sudden, so the medicine appears to you typically in either like a serpent, a snake, like a dragon form, or like an old woman. Yeah.
You see it like a snake in front of you.
Typically, that's what they say.
Okay.
Wait, did you throw up or?
Oh, yeah. So I'm getting to that point.
It got to your turn. You threw up. Okay.
So
now
I'm getting
now
there.
You're part of them.
All of a sudden, I'm in this like altered state, maybe different dimension. And all of a sudden, I just start feeling, oh shit. And I go grab my bucket and I start purging. And at that point, you're just like, you're very uncomfortable. And it's so crazy because people ask, why do you keep doing this? And it's because it's a very uncomfortable state. And then finally you kind of settle in and you're like in this altered state. And for me, what I saw was one of my biggest fears is the dark, is dealing or facing negative energy. Other people could call it demons. Other people could call it demonic. I call it negative energy. And so all of a sudden I'm in this like dark space, like dark, cloudy, like the color of the blinds. It's like smoky, but I can't really see that. It's hard to describe. And then all of a sudden I'm having this like telepathic conversation with somebody that I can't see, that I know is a female presence, and that is like, how you doing? Like, what are you here for? And I remember just kind of floating around, and like it's tough to explain, but just bear with me. I remember floating around, and I remember going off to a different dimension over here where it got very heavy, very dark, very vibration, like very hard vibration. And I was like, and I would like, nope, I'll just hang over here. And he's like, so are you gonna face what you came here to face, or are you gonna continue on this path of halfway in, halfway out? It's like, fuck. What do you mean halfway in, half? She's like, that's how you live your life. Halfway in, halfway out. And so I was like, I'm going to stay over here, halfway in, halfway out. She's okay. And so she's like, how's that working for you? And again, I can't see anybody. I'm just having this conversation, and I'm like, oh, like it gives me chills because that's how I live my life. And I feel like that's how most people live their life, is not willing to step into the fire. So finally, as I'm seeing everybody drop like flies. And
what do you mean drop like flies?
Everybody around me is like now laying down, purging. I'm still not fully purging yet.
Yeah.
Because you start purging when you start surrendering.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I said, all right, fuck it, let's go. And she just grabbed me, and it was like this, into this dark. And when I tell you that I crossed over to the side of just darkness, I was terrified. It was so heavy that I couldn't stop purging. I was purging. And every time I would purge and I would look into the bucket, I would just feel this dark presence like in the bucket. And it got to the point, so they tell you in the pre-ceremony that listen to the music, because they're playing beautiful music the entire time. Amazing music, and it's in English, and it's just, the words are just, he's like, listen to the music. If you get lost, I'm like, get lost? Where the fuck am I going? Like, we're here.
Yeah.
So, and they say, if you can't deal with it, put your hand up and we'll come help you. But most of the time we'll see you. So it got to the point where I'm on all fours, I'm purging, and I remember just like shaking, well, at least what I felt was shaking. And I remember each time I would about to open my eyes and lift my hand, they were already over me with smoke and feathers moving the energy.
The people who like work there, or who are not on ayahuasca but are running.
Some of them are on a little bit just to connect.
Yeah.
And at that point, it gave me, if I felt safe to know that they were there, and it gave me courage to go back in. And so, like, you could literally open your eyes and I'll see you, and all of a sudden you close your eyes and you're just like in a distance.
So when you first started taking it and you started seeing this woman who was telling you,
I didn't see her yet.
You didn't see her. So did you hear her, or okay? So your eyes are closed.
Yeah.
You hear her, And then when you open your eyes, are you aware of where you're at
Yes.
presently? So it's not like you're
Sometimes you're just like in a very high drunken state. Like it's just you feel drunk or like on some, but I could see you. I could see everybody here.
okay. So you were aware of your surroundings at this point.
Yeah. So at that point, it's pretty heavy. I'm sitting there and I'm in this deep vibration, and I felt all my fears, everything that I felt like has ever broken me or challenged me, and everything that I've tried to avoid there. It was dark. It was demonic. It was everything from here to the sun that you could think of. It was tough. And every time I would open my eyes, I saw them there moving the energy, and I would just go back in.
What's the time frame on this? Like, so you're talking like, are we like an hour in?
Well, at
5 hours
this point, we're probably like an hour.
An hour in. Oh, dang! All this in 1 hour.
Wow.
This is a 3-day experience.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Dang, okay.
Are they giving you anything too, like water or anything at this
Yeah,
point?
water.
Okay.
Yeah, water.
Okay.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden I'm in it, and I remember her having this conversation with me, and I finally just say, it's so heavy, and my ego was like, I remember my hands being on the ground, and I was gonna lift my hand up, and I felt my ego put my hands down and said no, and it wouldn't let me. He goes, face it. And so I remember telling her, I was like, fuck you and fuck everything else. I'm done running. That's it. I'm done running. You're gonna have to kill me. I'm not living my life this way anymore. And when I said that, it was like silence. And I was like floating, like it felt like outer space.
Wow.
And telepathically, what I was hearing was like, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I'm proud of you for willing to face all the things you haven't been willing to face. And so she says,
All right, hold up. This is like your 20-second Geena the Latina PSA. I need you to like, comment, subscribe below because we want to keep this show going. So if you're liking what you're hearing, please do us a favor and like, comment, subscribe below, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Geena the Latina Show. That's the Geena the Latina Show. I don't know why I can't talk. Back to the show.
what we're gonna do now is what she was gonna show me now is you've been so numb and so disconnected for your entire life that in order for you to go out and do the work that you want to do in the world, it's important that you get to feel what you missed. So I've had a lot of trauma. I've had a lot of loss. Imagine being downloaded with all the pain that you've ever experienced at once. Like she literally zapped me down, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I'm in a ball and I'm like just crying and I'm feeling this pain in my body.
Like, are you taking, like, going through each experience? Like, you can feel each experience, or you just feel the pain of it? Like,
She gives you downloads.
Okay.
So there's downloads of all these things, like
all these memories.
Let me go back. When we were saying she,
the medicine. So we call her mom. We call her Mama Aya.
So it's not the someone that's actually there.
No,
it's actually the medicine.
We call her Mama Aya, Mama Ayahuasca.
Okay.
So I'm beginning to get downloads now of the people that I've lost, and just the pain of like just feeling the pain and it was all at once, and it was so much that it was unbearable. And she just told me, like, lean into it, like not in those words, but it was like surrender to it. And I remember at that point it was starting to get worse, and then finally when I truly let go and I literally just gave myself to her and to the medicine, it went away. And then from there, she started downloading me with all the sadness that I've ever experienced, all at once.
Jeez.
And at that moment, I had a towel like that, and I remember just laying down, and I was twisting the towel like in a side that you could hear it popping.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like opening my eyes, and then my friend over here and then my girlfriend over here were just staring at me, and they were like, and you're not supposed to touch anybody. You're supposed to have everybody have let them have their experience. And they were just like, you could see it in their eyes that they knew I was going through it. And I started crying like I'd never cried before. I started feeling the loss of my best friends, of the people that I felt I had guilt, the pain and shame that I had in myself. And it was as painful and as sad as it was also freeing.
Yeah.
I felt like one of those those ape people that get abducted by aliens, where they're like upwards like this, and this white.
Yeah.
I had this white thing coming through my heart because I truly felt I was beginning to heal.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
Sorry, that's my dog. You okay, Papas?
you too. I think he's purging.
Teddy.
Yeah.
Teddy,
Did you have
okay?
some ayahuasca too?
And so,
Teddy. Sorry.
no, that's okay.
He drank water. Every time he drinks water, he drinks it too fast, and that's what happens. Yeah.
And so, so at that point, it started to, I started to understand where we were going with this. You know, I started to really understand that this was something special, and as painful as it was, I already started seeing the payoff, and I started letting go. And when I started letting go, I literally started feeling the healing happen.
And, you know, to keep it really basic, aside from ayahuasca, a lot of people, you know, we've been taught our lives, like, don't cry, don't show emotion, blah, blah, blah. But like, the reality is, like, you need to be able, that's how you release that's how you release physical pain. Like, some people that get sick, get cancer, it's because they've never released any kind of pain. So how you said, like, actually, it was the worst cry of your life, but you felt good. Like, everyone needs that. So to me, what you're describing is like the biggest release, like, you can ever have.
Yeah.
And so, okay, that's it. That's all I want to say. Okay, so then what happens after that?
Well, before that, I mean, like, when was the last time that you really cried?
I had done some work earlier the year before, and that was when I had started really getting connected with my emotions again.
But before that, it had been...
It had been years.
Years, yeah.
Maybe like 10 years or something. You know, I didn't cry when my best friend passed away. Like, I had tears in my eyes. But, you know, I think like a lot of us, you know, the previous generations were always taught to, like, people always say it's Latinos, but it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
You know, like the generations before us were very violent. They'd gone through a lot. They were hardened because they had to be. You couldn't show that in the past. You know, now the way the world's moving, it's people are talking about, oh, people are so sensitive. I mean, you could say that, or you could say that they're just more connected to their feelings. Yeah. You know, so the pendulum now is swinging from that masculine energy to like that feminine energy, where people are starting to connect with themselves.
Yeah.
But from what happened from there was incredible. What happened from there was she started downloading me with visions of all the people that I have pretty much punished in my life because nothing's ever good enough for me. And so by nothing ever being ever good enough for me, she was downloading me the people that I'm punishing in my life because they're trying. And because just because they're not doing it the way I expect, it doesn't mean that they're not giving it their best. And so she started downloading me with visions of babies that weren't born. You know, I was a part of 3 abortions. You know, 2 of them I didn't have a choice in. But I never connected with those losses. There was trauma there that I never connected. But yet I lived in this guilt, in this victimhood that that I didn't want to get out of. That, you know, I felt sorry for myself, or you know, we just living in that circumstance. And she said, "You weren't ready to be a dad." She was like, "Who would have wanted to be a dad with somebody that wasn't willing to connect?" And like, she said, that kid would have died trying to please you, and nothing would have ever been good enough.
Wow.
And when you start getting those kind of messages, I was like, and then now I'm crying more, right? And so from there, it took me down to there was a vision of it's really hard, the visions that you have and you download. She showed me this image, and you know when they tell you like, hey, what do you see in this image? Well, she was painting this image, and in this image, I see my grandpa pulling my mom out of her house when she was a little kid into the back of the house, and this is in the 50s, right, or in the 60s, and then tying her to a tree by the chest, beating her, and then leaving her overnight.
Oh my God!
And now he's teaching me. And now the medicine is teaching me that why I'm scared of the dark. Yeah. Where this comes from, where the fear comes from. And
that's what people don't get a lot. Like, a lot of our fears, sometimes they're in our lifetime, sometimes they're in our parents. A lot of times they're in our parents. It's like our past lives, or it's like ancestral, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how the heck would we know how to heal that in present times? Most people don't understand that.
Wow.
So I'm glad that you brought that up.
It's passed down through our DNA, which is called epigenetics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So it goes that deep. Ayahuasca went that deep.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty.
I mean,
intense.
and think about this is in the 60s. There's no electricity, so like imagine like I'm scared of the dark, right? And imagine being out in the woods and getting beat by your dad and then left there overnight, tied to a fucking tree.
Yeah.
You know what it does to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
So from there, she started downloading me with visions and experiences of my mom, what it was like for her growing up. And she kept asking me, like, how much more do you need? And I'm giving a condense of, like, the 2 days, so that way we don't have to go. So some of them are, like, the day before or whatever.
Wait, I have a question then. So do you do this for a few hours, then you go to sleep, and then you take some more and do it again?
Yeah, it was like a 5-hour, experience.
5 hours, and then you go to bed?
And then after that, you eat, like, fruit, and you have some soup, and then you go to bed.
So you just wake up?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, how did you feel after just waking up?
day.
The first day.
After I woke up the first day, I mean, you feel heavy, you feel lightheaded, you feel like you're under the influence of something. I mean, sometimes I have a hard time walking there's a couple times where I've had a hard time walking to my bed. But you're out of it, and you wake up and that night was the first time I slept in the dark.
Oh, wow.
In like 5 years. Complete dark, pitch dark, and not have fear. And
so you go to sleep, you wake up in the morning, and you do it all over.
Do it all over. Yeah, do it all over.
And every time you have this different deeper thing.
Yeah. And like I said, she was giving me downloads of my mom. She gave me downloads of what my mom felt like crossing the border by herself, not knowing anybody. She gave me downloads of my mom when she was pregnant and worried her biggest fear was being a good mom. She downloaded me with this child facing outwards and looking at his back, kind of like Andrew's sitting right now, but his back. And you could see the rage in him, like shaking. It was my dad when his dad died. The fear that he had of growing up to be a father that he didn't have. So
is this stuff that you already knew, like Cesar, or is this all new stuff? Like, did you know that story of that your grandpa did that to your mom?
I didn't know the story.
You did? And what about all this stuff with your dad? Like, did you know all this, or was some of this new stuff?
It was new that it wasn't new that day. Some of it was new that day, but most of it was information that I had already known.
And I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like when you go that deep, they're showing that it's so that you can see from their perspective, or
Absolutely.
to see why you are what you are, see why they are where they are, so that you have a better understanding. Because
it was getting me present.
Yeah, and because with anyone, we never know anything about anyone, and whenever you hear, then once you can actually be them and feel them, then you have a better. You can be more compassionate. Yeah. You can be more understanding. You can be more forgiving towards them, towards yourself. Yeah. Correct? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Was there one story that like kind of came to you that you didn't know that you just kind of needed to confirm with your mom? Or did you already know, oh, that's for sure?
I don't know. Is it like stories, or is it just more you don't know? You can hear stories, but you don't know the true feeling until you're put in that, right? Like, I feel like ayahuasca puts you in that to really feel the fright that your mom felt.
It's really similar to don't touch the hot iron when you're growing up and you touch it, and the only way you learn is by touching it.
Yeah.
So we could sit here and say, hey, this is great, this is what I experienced. And you're like, okay, thanks, Mom. Mm-hmm. But until you actually feel what they felt, and you feel that terror, and you feel like what it's really like to we have it easy right now in life. Mm-hmm. This isn't like back in the day, you know?
Yeah.
And even their grandparents could say that our parents had it easy, but nothing could really make it stick the way it makes it stick when you feel the actual emotions of it, when you feel the pain and the suffering from it, when you feel the generational pain and anger from somebody that has been suffering from, rape and violence. And because that's what's happened in the past generations. People pretend not to know that. Yeah. It's difficult for someone to just say things and say, oh yeah, I understand, but you don't understand until you actually go through it.
And so transitioning into parents, I know you've done ayahuasca with your father.
My dad did it with me this year.
So tell us how that came about. Like, because you just said your mom thinks it's witchcraft or whatever you said.
Yeah, she's totally 100% convinced.
So how do you get your dad on board, and how was that experience? Because to me, it sounds like both a wonderful and crazy experience. Like, I wish my parents, so for me, my mom, I think she just doesn't listen to this side of me because I'm very spiritual. I'm into all this stuff. She's super religious, which I feel like I'm closer to God than ever, but I think people define it differently. So I think she just chooses to ignore this side of me. Like, it doesn't exist. Like, she'll probably never listen to this podcast. My dad's a little bit more open to it, and I feel like if I talk to him about
like my dad.
Yeah, he would probably do it. However, he wouldn't want to deal with the wrath of my mother. So how does your dad how did you get to this point? Like, hey, Dad, let's go do ayahuasca. And what happened when you did it with your dad?
My dad's my dad's big on like outer body experiences and like meditating, because when you meditate, you're able to disconnect, from your physical soul. So he has been into this for quite some time, and he's done a lot of work. And it's tough to tell sometimes, because when him and my mom go at it, it's like, it doesn't look like a person that's doing work. It just seems like an old, Mexican dude fighting with his wife.
Yeah.
But for the most part, he's doing the work. And when I asked him if he wanted to do it, because I know that he's always wanted to do stuff like this.
Oh, yeah.
He said, yeah. And then when my mom found out, she was pissed.
Yeah.
But he was like, I'm doing it. And my sister was like, let him do it. And then what helped is we had a lady come clean the house. And she moved a lot of spirits. And she told my mom, she goes, let him go do what he needs to do.
And when you say clean the house, someone may think you meant physically clean. What does that mean?
Cleaning, from the energy, the bad energy.
Yeah.
Okay. Like saging, right?
Yeah.
More than that.
Yeah, more
I would
than that.
suggest people do it. I think you can learn to do it yourself. I do it to my house all the time. Every time you guys come, I do it. Like, not that you're bringing anything. But
Wow, you hear that, guys? Talking about all you guys back here.
No, but when you bring in different energy and space.
You can do it daily, but
Yeah.
she did a very heavy cleaning because there were spirits in her house.
Yeah.
And
Really?
we felt them. And so she basically said that it was like an airport of spirits in our home, and you could feel the difference now. But when my mom heard that from the lady, she let us go. He was gonna go anyway. He was like, "You're not leaving me, whatever."
After she did the cleaning, did your mom feel a difference in the house as well?
Yeah, everybody did. Everybody felt it. There was a sense of peace there. So my dad went with me, and he got to see a big brick black wall the first day, and he didn't know what he meant. But it was funny because if you're not paying attention, you could miss the signs. On the way up there, he was like, he's like, mijo, he's like, I built these walls in my life where I didn't have a choice. I was 10, 12 years old. I had to be hard. I had to be strong because I had to be the man of the house. So for him, he didn't even catch that this big black brick wall was like the representation of his walls that he's built. And they're not good, they're not bad. So, he got to journal about that and what that could represent. And then the next day, he had a deep experience where Mama Aya brought his father to him, and he cried, and he told his dad he was sorry for all the bad things that he said to him when he left him, that he was mad at him and that he was angry, and he said that he had a moment of peace, that he just felt like he was let down, and so to be able to have that experience with your dad, and let him have that experience, because it's hard because you can't touch him and you don't.
So was he doing it and you weren't?
No, we were all doing it.
You were both doing it, okay.
But he was on the other side, and purposely, so I'd be present with myself, and he could be present with himself. And at that moment, he the second night he was able to have a deeper experience. It takes work. I mean, I'm able to do ayahuasca and drop right in.
Yeah.
And have a deep experience.
It's the same as meditation, kind of. Like, it takes work to get there. That's what people don't get. Like,
it's a mechanism.
Yeah.
Journaling, ayahuasca, meditation, these are all mechanisms. They're not, they're just ways for you to learn to drop in. It's not necessarily, you don't have to focus so much like, oh, I don't know how to meditate this way. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. If you know how to meditate, you know how to drop in, that's all that matters.
Yeah, see, I have trouble doing that. I can't meditate. I feel like I've tried different ways of meditating, and I can't do it. I don't know what it is.
I will say though, Cesar, and I think you'll agree with me, is that like once you learn how to drop in, you can drop in really quickly.
You can drop
right?
in immediately.
And to me, it took 2 years of me not saying, like you, Chris, not knowing how to meditate, not saying for me. And some people, it doesn't take that long for me, 2 years, but I still tried every single day. And I would just sit there. I'm like, what the hell is this thing people are talking about? Whatever, I'm hearing everything. But but it took repetition. It took me doing it every day for 5 minutes till one day, something really and I really believe this. I was not even dating this guy, whatever. Like, it was really like 3 weeks. And for some reason it ended, and I was so emotional about it. I was like, what the fuck? I barely, whatever. And I was so upset at myself for like being so emotional about it. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to meditate. Right. And that was the day. I truly believe he came into my life to teach me how to meditate, because after that, I dropped in, I got this euphoric feeling that I was like, this is the shit that everyone talks about. And after that, I woke up fine. I could care less about him. Like, I moved on. I saw that the reason why he came in was I understood why I was so upset. Mm-hmm. And since then, I could drop into meditation very quickly in any, situation. I could drop into the theta brainwave is what it's called. But I will say that before that, it was a good 2 years of like thinking I was meditating, but not, but I think that you have to practice that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's different ways, like doing meditation walks on the beach and just being present with all your senses and not thinking.
See, that's a hard thing because I'm a constant thinker. I'm always thinking about what's next and what I have to do later on in that day, or maybe even like the next hour.
Yeah.
So I'm just like,
there's nothing wrong with that. One thing that I learned is that let those thoughts and those thoughts go in like clouds. Like they come in, you don't try to stop them, and you don't try to force them. You just let them go in and let them go out. When I do 5 a.m. walks on the beach with my feet in the water, it doesn't matter what time of year. All I'm feeling is the sand in my toes, the water on my feet, the seagulls, the listening. What do I see? I'm not thinking. I used to go out there to think, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you could actually use that as a meditation walk. And those things just prepare you to do other to do other meditations and drop into those, and you just get better with time.
Yeah, because I've done that before too, like where I'll just be walking in the water, but then I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, how far can I go? I think I could go that far, and then I'll go that far. I'm like, I can't even go farther. Like, oh, now I'm exercising, and now I can go all the way back.
Yeah, and I think it's just not judging yourself and just being gentle with yourself is one thing that I've learned. And I mean, the benefits, like I would have never thought that my life would be where it's at now. Like I spend most of my day right now in deep gratitude, like joy in what I'm facing. And let me tell you something, like my life is not easy. Like people think that the demons that I had before are gone. There are more darker days now than there has ever been.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the difference now is that I've learned to have a relationship with him now. I'm not afraid of it now. But people are like, oh, you're healed. I'm like, you have no fucking idea. I think about suicide every fucking day. Every fucking day I think about suicide. Every single day I think about, when I journal, there's things that pop up that in the past I was shameful about or I was scared about, but I have a relationship with it now. So for me, it's just having balance and learning to have that relationship. And I would have never thought I'd be living a life of an abundance the way I'm living now.
Yeah.
So for somebody out there that just heard you say that you think about suicide every day, do you, some people might be like, well, then why did you do this experience if you're dealing with this every day, as opposed to as before, as you were kind of like masking it? So what would you tell somebody that says like, well, why would you do that then?
Do what, ayahuasca?
Yeah, like you went through this experience, now you kind of brought up to light.
It wasn't just ayahuasca. It was a lot of work that I did. But at the end of the day, it's like we all have a responsibility to show up to our own lives. You all have a responsibility to do your own work. And you got to go out there and play and do what works for you. And a lot of the times you got to ask yourself, is that judging that you're partaking in now, is that causing a lot of the depression where you're at now? Is that where you're at? Is that why where you are right now?
Yeah.
Depression, a lot of it comes from shame, and a lot of it comes from just guilt. It comes from work that we're just not doing and the things that we're not willing to face. Same thing with addiction. The things that fuel addiction are, a lot of it are shame and guilt, So, again, I'm not here to judge anybody and whatever they choose to do. You got to go what works for you. And if it's meditation and journaling, or if it's, pounding a bottle of alcohol every day, go for it. I mean, I'm not here to stop you, but I'm here to just say that what's worked for me is this. And I mean, you've seen my life just transform.
Yeah.
In the last, 12, 13 years since I've known you.
Yeah.
And again, it works for me.
Yeah.
And so I don't get caught up in the dualities of right or wrong anymore, or win or lose, or it's my fault. This is what works for me.
And I'm glad you're kind of, we'll end it on that. And I feel like we need to bring you back in to do a few topics that came up. I want to do one on suicide. I want to do one on mental health, all that stuff. But what you said is, I truly believe is like, do what works for you, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast. Because in every episode we explore something different, and we're not saying this is the end all be all, you have to do this, but I'm a big believer in like, do what works for you and try it. Like not try it all, but like I used to be, besides ayahuasca, I haven't tried that yet, but I'm pretty open to like trying things to see what works for me. Like therapy may work for some person, it may not. Yeah. Ayahuasca may be better than fucking therapy for somebody else. You know what I mean? And so that's why I wanted to do this podcast, so we open people's eyes to explore it. And maybe you're like, nah, but maybe you're like, yeah, you know? And so anyways, thank you for coming on to the podcast. Where can people find you? If they want more on Cesar.
Well, you go to the Iron Minds podcast.
Okay.
You know,
And on Instagram, what is it?
on Instagram, it's Iron Minds _podcast.
He's looking
I
at the
don't know. I try to
producers
stay on
because they're the
social
same
media.
producers for
Drug
his
Mario,
show.
come on.
Yeah, it's the Iron Minds _podcast.
Okay.
Or you can find me at Cloak and Pedal.
In Little Italy.
In
Yes.
Little Italy.
It's great. Yeah.
And then I got a couple other new projects that I'm working on. So
Ooh, they're going to be
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So one of them is going to be putting kids. The new business model will be. I'll be working with Esteban Oreo, the photographer from LA,
Yeah.
and we're going to be putting together.
huge.
He's going to be selling his photos in the restaurant, but whatever we make from the photos or the art installations, we'll be putting into a foundation to put young Latinos and Blacks through college.
Oh,
That's
wow.
awesome.
Yeah. So if I'm going to stay in the business, it needs to be community focused.
Yeah.
If not, it just doesn't
Why
mean
you're
anything
there.
to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Well, thank you, Cesar.
absolutely. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.